What happens when Hollywood's beloved funny man finally reaches his breaking point on national television? Adam Sandler, known for his easygoing demeanor and comedic genius, shocked audiences worldwide when he was forcibly removed from Jimmy Kimmel Live, after what started as a standard celebrity interview spiraled into an explosive confrontation that left viewers stunned. The incident that has everyone talking reveals a side of late-night television that network executives never wanted you to see. Before I get into all the jaw-dropping details of this incredible showdown, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the biggest celebrity confrontations and behind-the-scenes truths that mainstream media tries to sweep under the rug. The tension between Adam Sandler and Jimmy Kimmel had reportedly been simmering beneath the surface for years. Industry insiders suggest their professional relationship had grown increasingly strained, with Kimmel allegedly making subtle jabs at Sandler's recent film projects during previous appearances. However, no one could have predicted how dramatically things would unravel during what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview for Sandler's latest project. The fateful night began innocuously enough. The studio audience erupted in applause as Adam Sandler walked onto the set with his characteristic shuffling gait, dressed in his trademark casual attire, a stark contrast to Kimmel's tailored suit. The host greeted Sandler with what appeared to be genuine warmth, but keen-eyed viewers noticed something off about Kimmel's smile, a certain tightness around the eyes that suggested insincerity. "Great to have you back, Adam," Kimmel began, his tone conveying the practiced smoothness of a veteran host. "It's been a while since you've been on the show." Sandler settled into the guest chair, his posture relaxed but alert. "Yeah, good to be here, Jimmy. Thanks for having me back." The first few minutes proceeded according to the familiar late-night interview format, with discussions about Sandler's family life and upcoming projects. The audience laughed at Sandler's self-deprecating jokes, and the atmosphere seemed comfortable, if somewhat restrained. Then came the pivot that would change everything. "So Adam," Kimmel said, leaning forward with a glint in his eye that regular viewers recognized as his preamble to a potentially controversial topic, "your last few films have been, let's say, critically divisive. Some critics have suggested you're just phoning it in for the paycheck these days. Any response to that?" A barely perceptible shift came over Sandler's expression, a momentary tightening of his features before his professional mask slid back into place. The studio audience's laughter faltered, sensing the unexpected hostility in Kimmel's question. "Well, Jimmy," Sandler replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "I've always made movies for the fans, not the critics. As long as people are enjoying themselves and I'm having fun making them, that's what matters to me." Kimmel nodded with exaggerated understanding. Sure, but don't you worry that you're damaging your legacy? I mean, I loved your early work, we all did. But now," the implied criticism hung in the air, and the studio grew uncomfortably quiet. Sandler shifted in his seat, his easygoing facade beginning to crack. "My legacy," Sandler repeated, his voice carrying a hint of edge that those familiar with his work rarely heard outside of his more dramatic roles. "I appreciate the concern, Jimmy, but I think my career speaks for itself. 25 years in this business, and I'm still making films people want to see." Rather than backing off, Kimmel doubled down. "But wouldn't you agree there's been a decline in quality? I mean, compare something like Uncut Gems to some of your recent Netflix offerings. The difference is pretty stark." The camera caught a flash of genuine hurt cross Sandler's face before it hardened into something more resolute. The audience, typically primed to laugh at even the tamest joke, remained silent, aware they were witnessing an exchange that had veered far from the scripted banter of late-night television. "You know, Jimmy," Sandler said slowly, deliberately placing his water glass down, "I've been coming on your show for years, always played along with your jokes, even when they were at my expense, but I'm getting a weird vibe tonight. Almost feels personal." Kimmel gave a dismissive laugh, waving away Sandler's observation. "Don't be so sensitive, Adam. It's just comedy, right? That's what we both do for a living." "There's comedy, and then there's respect," Sandler countered, his usual laid-back demeanor giving way to a more assertive presence. "I'm starting to feel like this isn't really about my movies at all." The tension between the two men was now palpable, the pretense of friendly banter completely evaporated. Behind the cameras, producers began signaling frantically, aware that the interview was veering dangerously off course. Kimmel's face flushed slightly, but he pressed on. Well, since you brought it up, maybe it's not just about the movies. Maybe it's about how you've changed, Adam. There was a time when you were the most approachable guy in Hollywood. Now I hear stories about how difficult you can be on set, how you demand special treatment. The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. The audience collectively inhaled, many shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This was no longer entertainment. It was voyeurism into what felt like a private grudge being aired in public. Sandler stared at Kimmel for a long moment before responding. You want to do this here? For real? Because those stories you're hearing, Jimmy, I'd be real curious to know where they're coming from. Or maybe I already know. A tense silence descended over the studio. The camera caught a production assistant frantically making a slashing motion across her throat, signaling to cut to commercial, but Kimmel held up a subtle hand, indicating he wanted to continue. I don't think I need to name sources, Adam, Kimmel replied, his tone carrying a smug certainty that seemed calculated to provoke. Hollywood's a small town, and word gets around, especially about how someone treats the crew, the people who can't fight back. At this, something fundamental changed in Sandler's demeanor. The genial, somewhat goofy personality that had charmed audiences for decades was gone, replaced by a man visibly struggling to maintain his composure in the face of public humiliation. That's a serious accusation, Jimmy, Sandler said, his voice dangerously quiet and completely untrue. I've built my career on treating everyone with respect, from the director to the craft services team. Ask anyone who's actually worked with me, not whatever so-called sources are feeding you gossip. The audience, sensing they were witnessing something authentic and unscripted, remained in rapt attention, the atmosphere electric with tension. This wasn't the good-natured ribbing typical of late-night television. It was a genuine confrontation between two industry heavyweights. Kimmel leaned back in his chair, his body language suggesting he was enjoying the confrontation far more than a professional host should. Look, Adam, you can deny it all you want. But people talk, and what they're saying isn't flattering. Maybe that's why your last 3 projects underperformed so badly, both critically and at the box office. The comment struck like a physical blow. A murmur rippled through the audience, many clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview had taken. Behind the cameras, the show's director was frantically gesturing toward the production team, but Kimmel subtly shook his head, determined to continue down this path. Sandler took a deep breath, visibly centering himself. When he spoke again, his voice was steady but charged with an intensity rarely seen from the actor known primarily for his comedic roles. You know what, Jimmy? I came here tonight as a professional, to promote a project that hundreds of talented people worked incredibly hard on, people whose livelihoods depend on the success of this film, and instead of talking about their work, you're sitting there taking cheap shots based on gossip. Sandler leaned forward, his gaze locked with Kimmel's. So let me ask you something. Is this really about me, or is it about the fact that I declined to participate in that charity event you were organizing last month? Because ever since then, I've been hearing that you've been bad-mouthing me all over town. A flicker of surprise crossed Kimmel's face before he could mask it. Clearly, Sandler had struck a nerve. The studio audience, now fully invested in this unexpectedly raw exchange, reacted with a collective intake of breath. That's ridiculous, Kimmel scoffed, though his forced laugh did little to disguise his discomfort. Not everything is about you, Adam. I decline to comment on why you pulled out of that event, even though it left us scrambling at the last minute to find a replacement. I had a family emergency, Sandler countered, his voice rising slightly, which I explained to your team in detail. My daughter was in the hospital, Jimmy. Did they not tell you that part, or did you just choose to ignore it? Kimmel's expression faltered momentarily. Whether he genuinely hadn't known or had chosen to disregard this information was unclear, but he quickly recovered his composure. Well, that's convenient, isn't it? A family emergency that nobody can verify. The audience gasped at the callousness of the comment. Even the bandleader looked visibly uncomfortable, exchanging glances with the musicians that suggested they were witnessing something unprecedented in the show's history. Sandler's face darkened with genuine anger now, the last vestiges of his professional courtesy evaporating. Are you seriously suggesting I'd lie about my daughter being sick? What kind of person do you think I am? I think you're someone who's gotten very comfortable with having things your way, Kimmel retorted, doubling down rather than backing off. The kind of star who's surrounded himself with yes-men for so long that he's forgotten what it's like to be called out. Called out? Sandler repeated incredulously. For what, exactly? For prioritizing my family over a celebrity softball game. Yeah, I'm really the villain here. The sarcasm in his voice was palpable, and for a moment, it seemed Kimmel might finally recognize he had crossed a line. Instead, the host smiled thinly and reached for his cue cards. Let's move on, shall we? Your new film? No, Sandler interrupted firmly, surprising both Kimmel and the audience with his directness. We're not just moving on, Jimmy. You don't get to drag my reputation through the mud and then pivot to softball questions about my movie like nothing happened. A tense silence descended over the studio. The cameras, which typically would have cut away to a reaction shot or commercial break during such an uncomfortable moment, remained fixed on the two men, capturing every nuance of their increasingly hostile exchange. This is my show, Adam, Kimmel said coldly, all pretense of friendliness abandoned. We move on when I say we move on. And this is my reputation you're playing with, Sandler countered. So maybe it's time we talked about some of the stories I've heard about you over the years. Because Hollywood is indeed a small town, and word definitely gets around. Kimmel's expression hardened. I don't think that's a road you want to go down. Why not? Sandler challenged. You seemed pretty comfortable going down that road with me. What's the matter, Jimmy? Dish it out, but can't take it? The audience, sensing they were witnessing a genuine power struggle rather than scripted banter, had grown utterly silent. Even the usually boisterous front row, typically primed to laugh at the host's every quip, watched with rapt attention, aware they were seeing a side of celebrity culture rarely exposed on broadcast television. We're going to commercial, Kimmel announced abruptly, looking past Sandler to the camera. When we come back, we'll be talking with our next guest. But Sandler wasn't finished. That's your solution? Cut to commercial and hope everyone forgets what just happened? You practically called me a liar about my daughter being in the hospital, Jimmy. You think a commercial break fixes that? Security, Kimmel called out, his voice eerily calm despite the escalating situation. I think Mr. Sandler needs some assistance finding his way backstage. The audience erupted in shocked murmurs as two burly security guards appeared from the wings, approaching the guest chair where Sandler sat. The actor looked at them incredulously, then back at Kimmel, whose expression remained impassive. You're seriously having me removed from the stage? Sandler asked, disbelief evident in his voice. For calling you out on your behavior? I'm having you removed because you're becoming disruptive, Kimmel replied coolly. This is a comedy show, not a venue for your personal grievances. Sandler stood up slowly, deliberately, before the security guards could reach him. The irony here is incredible, he said, his voice now steady and controlled, despite the obvious tension in his body. You spend 10 minutes attacking me personally, then play victim when I defend myself. He turned to face the audience directly, something guests rarely did without the host's prompting. I've been in this business a long time and I've never been treated with such disrespect on a talk show. Not once. I hope you all remember this moment the next time Jimmy puts on his concerned face and talks about kindness and decency. The security guards had reached Sandler now, standing uncomfortably close on either side of him. The audience, clearly torn between their loyalty to a show many had waited months to attend, and their shock at witnessing a beloved actor being treated so poorly, remained in stunned silence. Just so we're clear, Sandler continued, addressing Kimmel directly now, I'm walking off this stage myself. Your security doesn't need to touch me. But everyone here, and everyone watching at home, should know exactly who you really are behind that desk. Kimmel's face had grown increasingly flushed during Sandler's speech, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his desk. Cut to commercial, he ordered again, more forcefully this time, ignoring Sandler entirely. Now. But the cameras remained fixed on the unfolding drama. the director either unable or unwilling to break away from what had become the most compelling moment in the show's recent history. "You know what the difference is between us, Jimmy?" Sandler asked, taking a step toward the exit but pausing to deliver one final thought. "I play characters for a living. You pretend to be yourself." With that, he turned and walked deliberately toward the stage exit, the security guards trailing awkwardly behind him like unnecessary shadows. The audience, seemingly unsure whether to applaud Sandler's dignity or remain loyal to the show they were attending, offered scattered, confused applause that quickly died away as Sandler disappeared backstage. Kimmel finally found his voice again. "Well," he said with forced levity that failed to disguise his anger, "I guess some people can't take a joke anymore. We'll be right back after this break with our next guest, who hopefully has a better sense of humor." But the damage was done. The awkward silence that followed his attempt at damage control spoke volumes, and the expressions on the faces of the audience members captured by the cameras suggested that most viewers understood exactly what they had just witnessed. Not a guest being difficult, but a host abusing his position of power. The fallout from the confrontation was immediate and severe. As Sandler exited through the backstage area, crew members exchanged uncomfortable glances, many of them clearly sympathetic to the actor despite their professional allegiance to the show. The production assistant who attempted to hand him his personal belongings was met with a polite nod from Sandler, who maintained his composure even as the adrenaline of the public confrontation still coursed through him. "You okay, Adam?" the assistant asked quietly, genuine concern in her voice. "I will be," Sandler replied simply before making his way to the exit. Meanwhile, back on stage, Kimmel struggled to regain control of his show. The commercial break had ended, and he returned with a strange smile that failed to reach his eyes. The audience, still processing what they had witnessed, responded with noticeably subdued applause. "Welcome back," Kimmel began, his voice carrying a forced cheerfulness that contrasted sharply with the tension still hanging in the air. "Well, that was certainly unexpected. In all my years of hosting, I've never had a guest react quite so strongly to a little friendly ribbing." His attempt at minimizing the incident fell flat. Several audience members were visible on camera exchanging skeptical glances, clearly not buying the host's characterization of what had transpired. Kimmel, sensing the room's mood, attempted to pivot quickly to his next guest, but the damage was done. The remainder of the show proceeded with an unmistakable pall hanging over it, the typically energetic audience responding with restrained enthusiasm at best. What Kimmel failed to understand in that moment was that audiences are smarter than many television executives give them credit for. They recognized authenticity when they saw it, just as they recognized a calculated attempt to humiliate someone for ratings. In siding with the powerful over the authentic, Kimmel had miscalculated badly. The incident didn't end with the closing credits. Within hours, clips of the confrontation had spread across social media, igniting fierce debate among fans and industry insiders alike. The hashtag saying "Sandler was right" began trending, with many viewers expressing support for the actor's dignified response to what was widely perceived as unprovoked hostility. So what really happened that night? Was this simply a case of two big personalities clashing in an unscripted moment? Or was it something more calculated? A ratings grab that backfired spectacularly? The truth, as is often the case in Hollywood, likely lies somewhere in between. What remains undeniable is the impact of that night on both men's public personas. In standing his ground against what he perceived as unjust treatment, Sandler revealed a depth of character that many of his fans had always suspected existed beneath his easygoing exterior. And Kimmel, in choosing power over compassion, reminded viewers that the persona of a late-night host is just that, a persona. The next time you watch a seemingly casual interview on late-night television, remember this incident. Remember that behind the smiles and polished banter lies a complex power dynamic rarely acknowledged openly. And remember that sometimes, the most revealing moments in entertainment are the ones that were never meant to be captured on camera at all. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone you admired stood up against unfair treatment, even when it might have cost them. Share your stories in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next video.